Howdy, 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 everyone. Tad Stevens on the Micro Success Secrets podcast, where we focus on business, psychology, and marketing, and how you can use that in your business daily and long term. Today, I'm talking with Kim Byler, who is the principal and founder of Higher Ground Consulting Group, LLC, located in Central Pennsylvania, where he helps leaders and their teams to thrive. He does this through virtual and in-person learning events focused on self-discovery and interpersonal skills development, coaching to help leaders grow and change, and employee selection using assessments to find the best fit. He writes a weekly blog for his firm's website and publishes a monthly e-newsletter. He's an authorized partner for Everything DISC, that's DISC, 5 Behaviors of a Cohesive Team, PXT Select, and has been an entrepreneur since 2002. Ken, welcome to the show, and let me know if I missed anything.
You got it all there, Ted. Thanks for having me.
All right, super. Well, let's get started. And I like starting out with this question because I think it sets a good tone for the show and the discussion is, if you could get in a time machine and you could go back in time and you could change any one business or life decisions, first off, would you change it? And if you would change it, what would you change it to?
Okay. Well, I'm not one to usually second guess myself. So this was a challenging question for me to think about. There's one thing that I did right out of high school that early in my career, I revisited pretty often. So I chose that to think about. I decided to delay going to college. And
Okay.
A lot of people do that. For me, it was a combination of family and personal reasons, and not going to get into those, but that decision, I think early in my career did change the way my life trajectory went for sure, because I, in high school, wanted to be an architect, and obviously that didn't happen. So it did change that trajectory, but I also think that it allowed me to discover my talents and passions, which I'm not sure if I had pursued the architectural degree would have necessarily turned out the same way. So I certainly wouldn't have been an entrepreneur. Maybe I would have. I might have owned an architectural firm somewhere. But it is a decision that I think up until maybe 10, 15 years into my career, I really did think that I might have made a mistake. Now, I did end up, after not going formally to college, I did end up doing a correspondence course back then. Now it would be virtual university, I suppose, to get an associate's degree, which was a very different experience, obviously, than being in a classroom. But it is something that I do still occasionally wonder what would have happened if I had gone back and revisited that. As it turns out, I'm happy with my life the way it is, too. But it would have been fun to think about whether anything would have been different.
Okay. Well, kind of along those lines, if you could go back again and you could look and you could find out one decision that turned out to be just super positive. It can be the same decision, but, it just turned out super positive to where you can look back at it and you can think of things as everything that happened before that and everything that happened after that. Do you have one of those kind of things?
I actually do. It was probably the biggest single decision I've made in my career and personal life. Back in 1986, my wife and I were residing in Central Pennsylvania, where we are now, in kind of a semi-retirement mode. I'm still working, my wife's retired, but I had a secure job and a leadership position in a family-owned business. It wasn't my family, so I wasn't ever going to be an owner, or I think I would have continued to be an executive in the business, but I wasn't going to be an owner. And I had a chance to change careers and do something totally different. And so in 1986, I would have been in my early 30s. And I was really intrigued by the idea of going into a brand new industry. I went from the for-profit world to the not-for-profit world. That was the transition. Okay. And so I uprooted my family. Our young son was going into 3rd grade. We uprooted our family, moved to southeastern Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia. And we spent the next 34 years there. And during that time, that move wasn't, the only move I made in my career. I obviously moved around to some other companies after I got into that area. But what it did for me is it changed my perspective about the world. It got me away from a rural setting to a more suburban setting. I had a chance to network with people that I probably never would have had a chance to get to know. And in a lot of ways, it put me on the path toward entrepreneurship. And if I would not have met mentors and associates in that area during that time in my life, I probably would have never launched a business and never ended up doing what I'm doing now. So I feel like that decision really did transform who I am as a person, and it transformed my career. And I would say it transformed my family life too, because my wife became much more confident, getting to know new people in a new area. And even though we decided to retire back to a community that we know, and because she has family here, I feel like that whole experience was good for both of us and was really a positive in my life.
All right. Well, and this leads into the next question. And it can be the same answer. But what decision, if you look back, was the scariest?
Well, I think starting my business was probably the scariest thing for me. I'm not a natural risk taker. I'm much more likely to take risks now that I've experienced a few as an entrepreneur. But I had a couple of equity partners, who came to me about this idea of launching the business. They wanted to put some money in it. They thought I would be good at leading the company. They didn't want to have any day-to-day operational stuff in it. So they gave me a lot of autonomy, but they also forced me to decide if I wanted to try to manage things on my own and try to be my own boss. And I think I would not have done that if they wouldn't have been there to push me. And I know that it was really scary, not just for me, but for my family to think about, because going from steady income to more unsteady income was a big deal. And I had to convince myself that I could sell, that I could promote myself in a way that people would want to use my services. I had to figure out exactly what I wanted to do with the business and how I wanted to focus and target. And all of those things were really scary, but they were also in a lot of ways invigorating. And it ended up being a great thing. And now I would probably be more likely to, I would say, do other risky things if I had the opportunity. But that one was probably the scariest thing I've ever had to do.
Okay, super. And I want to make a point here is that, I love the way that you went through that and you described it, because in my mentoring and my coaching, I see a lot of people get to that point and stop.
Yeah.
And so, which leads to the next question is, when you come to those decisions or decisions like those, or you coach people or you mentor people that come to those decisions, do you have a way that you get through it? Do you have a different way or the same way that you suggest, or maybe, encourage them to get through those types of decisions? Because a lot of people do stop.
Oh, no, I agree with that. I early on in my entrepreneurship, I don't know if I had an answer to that, because at times I did run into people who I was coaching who were stuck. And I think I helped them navigate it just because I held them accountable to make decisions.
Right.
But what I discovered in that, and it helped me too, is that fear is a really powerful motivator. And I think most of us, when we're facing a big decision, especially a scary one, will allow the fear to paralyze us. And sometimes those fears are unfounded. And what I've discovered about myself anyway, is that I was really good at setting goals. I'm a natural goal setter. I love to achieve things. I kind of wake up in the morning, my glass is empty, and I have to fill it up with stuff that I do during the day. That's kind of how I look at it. So I'm motivated to do things and get things done. However, I found that when I was trying to grow my business, that there were times when I needed to delegate to other people. And I struggled to do that. And I would make this goal and commitment to do it, and I would really work hard at it. And it would seem like every time I had a chance to really be successful, I found myself doing the same thing, which was making excuses like, oh, I can't really give that up because I'm the only one who knows how to do it, or I'm sure they can't do it as well as me, or whatever, as fast as me. And I would end up going back into my old routines. And then I discovered that fear was part of that equation. And when I discovered that, I started naming what those fears might be. And for me, in that case, the whole idea of delegating was I felt that my value was in the things that I do, not in who I am or in the things that I'm not doing because I'm doing stuff I probably shouldn't be doing. And so I ended up kind of challenging those fears by testing them. They were really assumptions I was making about how people were going to respond. And so I tried delegating some things to an intern that I had for a while in the business. And I found that when I did that, first of all, nobody else that I was working with, including my clients, cared one bit who was doing the work. And I don't know why I thought they would. And I found out that she could do some things better than I could. And I would never have acknowledged that if I hadn't tried it. So testing those assumptions and kind of blowing them up in my mind helped me to recognize that, hey, the next time I face an issue like that where I'm stuck, the first thing I need to do is just acknowledge that there's probably a fear there that's keeping me, an unfounded fear that's keeping me from doing it. And I need to name it and I need to test it to see if it's really valid or not. So I do the same thing with my clients. And they really appreciate that. Sometimes it's hard for them to come to grips with what that fear might be.
That is, yeah.
But when they name it and then they get a chance to test it, they often discover that they usually always discover the same thing I did, that people aren't looking at it the way that you are. And so your fears end up becoming assumptions that aren't valid. And because of that, it takes you down a path you don't want to go. And just by acknowledging that and testing it, you can get unstuck and move forward, even when it's really challenging stuff that you're trying to deal with.
And I love that the part that I heard that I haven't heard before. And this is where, because I've done over 100 of these, and I have never heard anybody say, name your fear.
Yeah.
And that to me is powerful because it puts it in, I mean, it visualizes it for me. If I can see it, I can't shove it off to the side and ignore it. Do all those kinds of things. You know, it's got a name now. It's got a presence.
And sometimes people have to name their fear like I did. I had to name mine in terms of the reaction that I was expecting to get, or even what I envisioned was going to be the outcome. Like, so I didn't necessarily say I'm anxious as a fear, because anxiety is a form of fear. I had to say, in my case, I had to say, I'm afraid that I'll lose value in the eyes of my clients and my partners if I'm not doing this stuff. And that was naming my fear. The fear was that I wouldn't have any value. Well, as it turned out, my value is different for in their eyes than what I was seeing. But if I wouldn't have said that out loud and tested it, I wouldn't have known that that's what was really going on. So that's sometimes what I do with my clients is I help them to think about what they're struggling with. And then if they can't name the fear outright, I try to just describe what your behavior looks like. What do you actually do when you're trying to get through this that hurts you? Or what do you think other people are gonna say if you don't do it? And that helps them to frame the fear. And once they name it, it's much easier to test it. And then you almost always find out that it's not true.
Yeah, excellent. I'm going to definitely make a note about that in the show notes because I love that one. So
thank you.
Time to start wrapping up a little bit, but I want to close with the question that I always like to ask. And because it is my belief that, especially people that I get on this show, is that people have come to a point in their careers and their business in their life where money is not the driving factor. There is something else that motivates them. And as I like to put it, maybe in a little slang type saying is, what gets them out of bed? What gets you out of bed in the morning? Why do you get up day after day, do the stuff you do? What's your passion?
Well, my passion is helping people to get better at whatever they do. And because I focus on leadership, I basically try to make leaders and their teams better. I help them to thrive. And I'm passionate about that because I have experienced firsthand how valuable it is to have a mentor or a coach or somebody do the same thing for me. So I was very fortunate in my career. Everywhere I went, I had people like that who knew more about me than I knew about myself. And self-discovery is a big part of being successful in life. And most of us don't spend any time trying to do it. And so early on, I learned that the way people view me is more important than how I view myself. And so and what I mean by that is, for example, I'm very resolute in how I approach things. I'm fairly certain when I have an idea or an opinion that I'm right or that it's going to work. And that comes across to a lot of people, depending on how I say it and how I behave when I say it, comes across as arrogant or stubborn. And I didn't see that early in my career. And it was pointed out to me by my first mentor. Hey, this is what people are probably thinking when you say it that way and when you do it that way. And so he encouraged me to, first of all, tone down my intensity a little bit, and be more be aware of my tone of voice and my body language. And then he said, be more curious about what other people are saying. And so even if you're the first one in the room to say what you think, don't assume that everybody is going to agree with you. And when they don't agree with you, get curious about where they're coming from. Don't try to defend yourself. And if they don't say anything, assume that they want to say something, and be adamant about, hey, this is just me talking here. I want to know what you think. And if you don't have an opinion now, I want to hear it in another couple hours. Like, go and think about it and come back and tell me. And that little piece of advice really made a difference for me. And then I've spent a lot of my career really trying to understand myself well, so that I can flex my behavior when I'm with people who are different than me. And I think that makes a huge difference in my coaching and training that I do. People don't necessarily see me, like, I'm a natural introvert, but I don't think I come across that way when I'm talking to people. And yet all I've done is I'm aware of what my tendencies are, and I've learned to adjust. And I think that's what people need to do. I tell my clients that one of the reasons I'm so passionate about my work is I don't want people to change in terms of being different. I want them to be a better version of themselves. Like that sounds like an oxymoron, because I am asking them to change, but I don't want them to think that somehow they have to give up their innate talents, their personality and all that in order to be effective. No, I want them to harness what they do well, but know the limitations of those things, just like I've had to learn that. And I think that's a big deal for people. When they become self-aware, they can modify how they lead and how they interact with people, how they coach and mentor, how they sell, all those things. And so it makes a big difference if you're self-aware. And that is something that I definitely am passionate about doing. I want people to become better versions of themselves.
That is awesome. I'm making a note on that because I want to make sure that gets in the show notes too.
Good.
All right. Oh, that I really, really appreciate all that, Ken. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. Time to start wrapping up here a little bit. So is there anything that you'd like to close with to leave the listeners and viewers that might benefit them?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a student of leadership, so I love to write about leadership stuff. I don't know. I think, I have a following of people who do read my stuff. So every week on my website, which is Higher Ground CG, C as in Charles, G as in George.com, I write a blog post. I hardly ever miss a week. And it's always just a topic that I find interesting. Maybe it's a current event thing, maybe not. And so I try to give some tips on how to do things there so people can read that. And then I do have this newsletter, which I publish every month. It's subscription-based. It's free, but you do have to sign up for it. And so if people want to do that, they can do that on the contact page at my website. Just indicate you want my newsletter. I'll put you on the list, and I won't be offended if you read one issue and unsubscribe. I won't care. But those are the things that I would want people to do. And then obviously, if somebody is really struggling out there with leadership issues, or they have a team that isn't functioning well, or they want some personal coaching, I do this stuff all the time. I do it virtually, in person. I'd be happy to talk. And to reach out to me, you just need to go to my website, use the contact page there, or you can reach out directly via my email, which is ken@highergroundcg.com.
All right, super. And again, I will make sure all that is in the show notes so everybody can find that. Ken, thanks again. Really appreciate it. And everybody, thanks for listening and watching whatever you're doing. Have a safe and productive week and be the very, very best at whatever it is that you're doing. Until next time, this is Tad Stevens with Micro Success Secrets. Bye for now.